Well, we're going to talk about the nervous system and the nervous tissue, and that's this video is going to go in through several different angles, and we'll culminate by looking at neurons, and then we'll save some other aspects of this for our second video. Alright, so this is what we're going to look at. We're going to go through the general functions of the nervous system, the classification, the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and if we have time, we'll go into the three parts of neurons and stuff like that. Okay. Brought to you by Curious Marineland. Alright, so let's take a quick look here. All right, you got this guy. Obviously, he doesn't want to get eaten. He's going to run from the stimulus, which in this case is a bear. This is showing you the input and what do we do with it. All right. So first, let's make sure we understand the central nervous system and the peripheral. What are they? You got the brain and the spinal cord, and this is going to kind of interact and integrate, as it says there, or your input and output. Well, the input is going to come from the peripheral, and the output's going to go to the peripheral. So let's look at a basic structure here. And next slide I've kind of drawn in. So here is your central nervous system in red and your peripheral. So input's coming in from the peripheral anywhere, and then it's going to go to the central nervous system, process, and then come out with some type of response. So we call this the afferent and efferent. I'm saying afferent, I'm emphasizing saying afferent. Right, so this is sensory receptors, neurons that are going to send information to the central nervous system, versus efferent is going to be kind of the response. So what I want you to do is get an idea of several different angles, from a picture of a neuron going into the spinal cord, and a neuron going up to the brain, and then a neuron coming back and telling it what to do. All right? And what I should say is say nerves and tracts and things like this. This is a nice little thing. What we should do when we're done is to go back at this picture and add in like the type of neuron that's going to be involved, the type of neuron that's going to be involved. And this is looking like a motor output, but there's more than that. So we need to define some certain aspects of this. This is a good little visual that will come to at the end of this unit. So let's talk here. Receptors. Okay, so we got somatic. This is we got a lot of stuff that we should look at here. We've got somatic. We have visceral. All right, so think about somatic is like your muscles or things on your skin. They're picking up that detection, but we forget about visceral. So everything that's going on here, we also have receptors on your internal organs. So when you think about visceral, you should think about internal organs. All right, internal organs. So if you follow the pathway, they're both going up in the afferent division. So notice we're in this peripheral nervous system. So if you go back to that picture, we're talking about your cranial nerves, your spinal nerves, they're going to be sending information to the spinal cord, or ultimately up to the brain. So follow the arrow, and there's tissue that's involved. There's specialized neurons that are involved here, and then when we process, then we're going to come back down, and it might be skeletal muscle. It might be autonomic. So if you feel like this is kind of like your voluntary control. Autonomic is split into two categories, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. But smooth muscle, cardiac, glands. At the end, I'm going to bring this picture up and I'm going to show you another neuron and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just kind of jump through some things here, and then we're going to get to the nervous tissue actually identifying. So some of the things you're going to see is things like ganglion, nerve, where they're located. Nerves are found outside of the central nervous system, meaning they're found in the peripheral nervous system. Let's look over here. And when you're inside the central nervous system, so here's the peripheral, here's the central. All right, you got your gray matter. You got gray matter in both areas. You got white matter in both areas. So we're going to talk more about that when we talk about the specialized cells and glia cells and Swann cells and things like that. Those are support cells. All right, so you got your gray matter. You have these. All right, so you call nuclei, ganglion, nerve, tract. I'm going to culminate by showing where all those fit in here. So, but let's see. There's another good buzzword here. Pathway. Find the pathway. Ascending or descending. Ascending as in going up to the brain. Descending as in coming back. So view ascending is follow this. This is kind of going up to the brain. All right, and then the descending, follow this. I should change colors. Just follow the mouse going back. All right. these are various types of receptors. I probably should do a separate video for them, but you have a variety. See, this is something, we call it a plexus when it's branching out of a whole bunch of nerve fibers. All right, you can have free nerve endings. You can have these pressure receptors. So I think I'm going to skip over this and move on to, all right, these are some other examples of receptors like baroreceptors in your digestive tract, your bladder wall. So let's jump down to here. All right, so what do we have here? Posterior column. All right, posterior column, that is the dorsal. Anterior would be the ventral. So we're going to bring that in. See, if you look here, so you got dorsal, and then this would be ventral. There's important things that we're going to see here. For example, sensory coming up the dorsal side, and then coming up the dorsal side, and then you're going to see the ventral side would be the motor coming back. So back to, say this. Now so I got this blue over here, and then say I got red over here. So, well, that should be red. So, like, the input's coming in from the dorsal, and then the output's going back, meaning, let's draw a little arrow here. That's going back to whatever type of response. And this could be skeletal muscle, it could be internal organs, or visceral. Now, this is another look. Notice, in a moment, we're going to actually look at this type of neuron, and then this type of neuron. We're going to know what's going on here. So again, you got skeletal muscle. Here's some somatic stuff. You got motor responses. You got visceral. So visceral versus somatic. So these are skeletal muscles. These muscles here might be these, not muscles, but this visceral would be like smooth musculature or a gland. And just to show how complex this can be. So you got your sympathetic nervous system. You got your parasympathetic. Those are all part of the autonomic. Okay, and there's a lot of terminology that we're going to go into. Now, seeing this is more of an intro video. For example, by the time we're done, you'll know what does it mean to be a postganglion. And over here, there should be something called a preganglion, which I don't see. Here we go. Preganglion and postganglion. All right, so I'm just going to run down to this part. Now, what I want to do is explain the different types of neurons, and you're seeing it right here. All right. Alright, and now this is a response. Now I probably should have made that a different color. So imagine this being a different color. And this could be the effector. So the stimulus is the sensory neuron is here, and then you got these tracts. They're going to go up to the brain. They're going to go up to the brain, and they're going to come back. So to the brain, going up, and then coming back. Ultimately, back, follow the pathway to, there we go. All right, so that's going to be a very key thing for us to look at. But let's come back to this, and now take a look. So let's look over here. We got skeletal muscle, and we got smooth, cardiac muscle, and gland. So we're following this pathway. This is showing this effector muscle, which is skeletal, but the same thing could be occurring for smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or glands. And you'll see neurons are going to be involved. So this is a neuron telling another neuron going in this direction. This is a neuron ultimately going to a skeletal muscle. That would be your effector, as in part of your somatic part of your central nervous system, versus this would be a gland, and that would be your autonomic. And we'll get into parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions later on. That's right. So now let's go ahead and talk about this. Now I want to go over neurons and the different types of neurons. So I'm looking at my time. I think I should go ahead and close up, and I'm going to go do another video on the different types of neurons, the support cells. But let's just kind of recap, what were we talking about here? All right. We were mainly, it really was focusing on this and talking about our central nervous system, our peripheral nervous system, sensory input to sensory output, whether it is a skeletal muscle or skin, or maybe it's internal organs, but they're basically going to be going up in the pathway here. So let me go back to this. I'm going to go ahead and change my color really quickly. We're at the 10-minute mark, so I want to go ahead and So this is peripheral nervous system. These would be nerves and spinal nerves or cranial nerves, and going to the spinal nerves are going to go to the spinal cord, and that's the central nervous, and ultimately go up to the processing center, through the thalamus and the brain. We're going to get into functional anatomy of the brain later, but then you got your motor commands. So this is sensory is input, motor is output. The output could be voluntary muscle like this. So let's I'll make that red now. So all right, so let's see, we are, go back to the pen. All right, so I followed this up here. That's input, that's afferent. Now your efferent is going to either be somatic or autonomic. If it's somatic, it's going to go right to the skeletal muscle. All right, if it's autonomic, it's going to be smooth muscle, cardiac, or glands. Now what we want to be able to do, so here's the response. Here's the response. Here's the response. And that's really kind of what we're going to see here. This right here would be this red line responding. This would be efferent versus what I've drawn blue is afferent. All right? Brought to you by Curious Brain Man. So in the next video, I'm going to go over the continue with the nervous type of tissue, not nervous type of tissue, nervous tissue, and we'll go into neurons, some support cells, and then go back to this picture. Go back to this picture, and all the other pictures, and start interlacing. Like, what is this type of neuron? Let's do this. Let's close by taking a look at it. I'm going to erase all the ink. See this neuron right here, and then this neuron. Notice this little bulb here, that cell body, and the axon and the dendrites. So we want to know the difference between those. All right? Again, brought to you by Curious Brain Land.